My ex slept with a neighbor. My sister took her side. This is what I built from the ashes. My name is Ethan. I'm 34 years old, and I swear to God I never thought I'd be this guy. The kind of man who lays his soul bare on an anonymous internet forum, typing his deepest wounds into a glowing screen in the dead of night. But life, I've learned, doesn't just tear up your plans. It shreds them, douses them in gasoline, lights a match, and then, with a cruel smile, hands you a single, scorched nail, and expects you to build a mansion. So, here I am. Here's my story. Before my life was detonated, it was tidy, deceptively so. On the surface, I had it all, the modest American dream painted in quiet, suburban colors. I was a senior mechanic at Hank's Auto, a good, honest garage where people knew your name and trusted you wouldn't rip them off. I loved my job. I loved the tangible satisfaction of taking something broken and making it whole again, the clean roar of an engine I'd just resurrected. My hands were perpetually calloused and stained with a fine layer of grease that no amount of soap could fully erase, and I wore those stains like a badge of honor. They were proof I was a builder. I had a rented house on a street lined with oak trees, the kind of place with tire swings hanging from sturdy branches, and neighbors who waved when you drove by. And I had Clara, my college sweetheart. We'd met 15 years ago over the sputtering engine of her beat-up Ford Escort. I was a broke student working part-time at the campus garage. She was an art major with eyes that could make you forget your own name. We bonded over a shared love for greasy spoon diners and the belief that the best conversations happened after midnight. I loved the way she'd laugh, a full, uninhibited sound that could fill a room and make it feel like home. Our life wasn't one of champagne and caviar. It was built on overtime shifts and budget holidays. It was supposed to be real, solid, bedrock. Every long day I spent under a car, every weekend I picked up extra hours, I was laying another brick. I was building a future for us, a future we'd mapped out on countless paper napkins. It was a future filled with the laughter of kids we hadn't had yet, road trips to national parks we hadn't taken, a life of comfortable, shared silence. We had our routines, or inside jokes, our plans, or, at least, I thought we had them. In reality, it was just me, alone, drawing blueprints for a house that was already rotting from the inside out. Then came the day my world didn't just turn upside down, it was atomized, reduced to dust, and bitter memories. It was our 6th wedding anniversary. I'd arranged to get off work early, a rare occurrence. For weeks, I had scrimped and saved, eating cheap sandwiches for lunch instead of buying from the food truck, putting every spare dollar aside. I'd used the last of my savings to buy a delicate silver locket, the one she'd pointed out in a jewelry store window months ago, thinking I wasn't paying attention. I always paid attention. I remember walking up the garden path, the small velvet-covered box feeling heavy and significant in my pocket. A stupid, hopeful grin was plastered on my face. I was picturing her expression when she opened it. But as I reached the front door, a strange quiet hung in the air. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of an empty house. It was a tense, holding its breath kind of silence. The hair on my arms stood up. I turned the key as quietly as I could. I found her in our bedroom. In our bed, the one we'd painstakingly assembled together with an Allen key and a lot of swearing on the first day we moved in. She was with our next-door neighbor, Mark. The surprise, it turned out, was all mine. I can still see it in high-definition freeze-frame. The tangle of limbs on our navy blue comforter, the way the afternoon light from the window illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, oblivious. Her face, when she saw me, wasn't one of shame or regret. It was pure, undiluted annoyance, as if I'd tracked mud on a freshly cleaned floor. Mark, A smarmy real estate agent with suspiciously white teeth just looked bored. In that single, heart-stopping, silent moment, I understood. Our 6-year marriage hadn't just died, it had been a ghost for a long, long time, and I was the fool who'd kept trying to hold its hand. The scene is burned into my memory, like a photograph developed in acid, a high-definition, slow-motion nightmare. The tangle of limbs on our navy blue comforter, the one I'd bought, because she said the color reminded her of the ocean at dusk. The way the afternoon sun slanted through the window, illuminating the tiny dust motes dancing in the air, utterly oblivious to the demolition of my life. Her face, when she finally saw me standing frozen in the doorway, wasn't etched with shame or regret or even fear. It was pure, undiluted annoyance, the look you give someone who has tracked mud onto a freshly cleaned floor. Mark, a smarmy real estate agent with teeth so white they looked fake, just looked bored, like I was an inconvenient interruption to his afternoon. In that single, heart-stopping, silent moment, the whole sham of my marriage collapsed in on itself. I understood with sickening clarity. Our 6-year marriage hadn't just died in that instant. It had been a ghost for a long, long time, and I was the lonely fool who had kept trying to hold its cold, transparent hand. The weeks that followed were a waking nightmare, a blur of hollow arguments, where my raw, screaming pain was met with her clinical, detached justifications, delivered as if she were reading from a pop psychology textbook. You were never emotionally available, Ethan. You were always at the garage, obsessed with work. A woman has needs, you know. It was masterful gaslighting. She twisted my dedication to providing for us into a character flaw, my hard work into neglect. I crashed on my best friend Leo's lumpy sofa, the springs digging into my back every night. Leo was a saint. He'd just show up with a 6-pack of beer and a pizza and sit with me in silence while I stared at the wall, letting me process the implosion of my reality. Clara, meanwhile, kept insisting it was a misunderstanding, a one-time mistake that we could work through with counseling. She wanted to play the victim, the neglected wife, driven to a moment of weakness. But then, the real truth came out. I found the texts, not on her phone, which she suddenly guarded like it contained state secrets, but on the family tablet she'd forgotten to log out of. I sat there on Leo's sofa, the tablet's cold light illuminating my face, and scrolled through an entire shadow life lived in plain sight. Months and months of messages between her and Mark, an entire second life. They talked about my work schedule, meticulously planning their trysts. He's on the Henderson transmission job. He won't be home before 9, one read. They mocked my predictable nature, my simple belief that our marriage was fine. He still thinks our someday trip to the coast is going to happen. So sweet, she'd texted, followed by a laughing emoji. This wasn't a fleeting lapse in judgment. It was a calculated, long-running campaign of deceit and betrayal that had been happening under my roof, in my bed, orchestrated by the woman I loved. The divorce was as brutal as you'd expect. She fought for everything. The house we rented, claiming she needed stability, the joint savings account, which was mostly my money. She even tried for the beat-up sedan I'd lovingly restored. Years before I even met her, her lawyer was a shark in a tailored suit, who looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. Milavier, a frazzled public defender type I could barely afford, seemed more interested in his lunch order than my life. But the blow that truly knocked the wind out of me, the one that left me gasping on the pavement, didn't come from Clara. It came from my own sister, Chloe. She's 29, a single mother to 2 kids. We'd always been close, or so I'd believed. After our father left, I'd stepped up. I was the reliable older brother. When she was struggling, I was there. I bought school supplies for my niece and nephew, fixed her rattling car more times than I could count, and twice covered her rent when she was between jobs, new questions asked. Her payment for that loyalty? She sided with Clara, completely. Not because she believed Clara's lies, but because Clara, fueled by Mark's money, started buying her things. Taking her out to fancy restaurants I could never afford, gifting her designer bakes, babysitting her kids so Chloe could go on dates. The ultimate carrot Clara dangled was the promise of setting Chloe up with a wealthy friend of Mark's. My sister sold our bond, our entire shared history, for the chance to land a sugar daddy. I called her one night, my voice cracking, desperate for a friendly voice, for family. Well, maybe you should have done something different. If you didn't want her to cheat, she told me coldly over the phone, her voice dripping with a condescension that felt like acid in my gut. Men never understand what a woman really needs. Clara said you were just boring. That was it. That was the moment I realized I was utterly, unequivocally alone. I hung up the phone, blocked her number, and in the suffocating silence of my friend's living room, I made a decision. I was going to rebuild. I had to. It was no longer a choice. It was a biological imperative. Survive. I took the pittance Clara's shark lawyer had allowed me to keep and found the cheapest apartment I could. It was a shoebox with a bathroom attached, the kind of place where you could simultaneously cook dinner on a hot plate, watch television on your laptop, and use the toilet without leaving the bed. The first night, sitting on a bare, squeaky mattress on the floor, I stared at the water-stained ceiling that looked like a jaundiced map of a country I never wanted to visit. 6 months prior, I had a wife, a home, a sister I thought had my back. Now I was in a dingy studio that smelled faintly of the previous tenant's despair, and Kat, my wife, was sleeping her way through the neighborhood, and my sister was captain of Team Clara. The worst part was their social media. It became a weapon they wielded with surgical precision. Clara and Chloe were suddenly inseparable, an unholy alliance of betrayal. They posted smiling selfies from brunch spots and wine bars I couldn't afford a glass of water in. Their captions were a nauseating tirade of cliches about living your best life, sisterhood, and cutting out toxic energy, a clear, public reference to me. One weekend, they posted an entire photo album from a beach trip to a resort in a Cove Clara, and I had always talked about visiting. It was our someday trip, the one we'd planned on a napkin in that diner years ago. The sight of them laughing on the very sand that had existed only in our shared dreams felt like a physical blow. It wasn't just them moving on, it was a deliberate act of cruelty, a victory lap danced upon the grave of my old life. My own mother wasn't much better. She kept urging me to work things out with Clara because marriage is about compromise. When I told her the graphic details of what I'd walked in on, she just signed. Well, relationships are complicated, Ethan. A man is supposed to provide, and not just money. The collective gaslighting was staggering. It was as if I was the unreasonable one for being devastated by years of betrayal. My breaking point, the moment the grief finally curdled into cold, hard resolve, arrived about a month after I moved into the shoebox. I ran into Chloe at the grocery store. I was in the aisle buying instant noodles and cheap coffee was my entire diet at that point. Her cart was overflowing with expensive organic snacks, artisanal cheeses, and imported wine, things she'd never have been able to afford on her old salary. I tried to turn down another aisle, but she spotted me and walked over, her face a mask of faux concern. "Oh, Ethan, you look terrible," she said, her eyes flicking down to my basket of beige-colored poverty food. "Are you eating properly?" Before I could answer, she launched into a breathless monologue about how wonderful Clara was doing, how Mark was so generous, how he'd taken them all out for a lavish dinner the previous weekend. Clara told me everything about why your marriage really fell apart, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, loud enough for the woman next to us to hear. You really needed to be more attentive to her needs, you know. It's not all about paying the bills. I just stared at her. My little sister, the one I helped our mum raise, the one whose tears I'd wiped after her first heartbreak. Standing here, in the middle of a grocery store, publicly shaming me, telling me I deserved this. As a final vicious twist of the knife, she added with a smirk, maybe Mark has a friend for you. Someone who can help you afford better food than that. She gestured to my basket with a flick of her wrist. Something inside me snapped. I didn't shout. I didn't make a scene. I simply dropped my basket. The plastic container of instant coffee cracked open on impact, spilling brown powder across the grimy linoleum, like a failed magic trick. I turned and walked out of the store without saying a word, the sound of her condescending TSKSK following me out the automatic doors. That night, a plan began to form, solidifying from the rage and humiliation. I was done feeling sorry for myself. I was done letting them make me feel like the villain in my own tragedy. I would rebuild my life from the absolute bedrock up, and I would do it so successfully that their smug laughter would be drowned out by the sound of my progress. My goal was no longer just survival. It was dominance. Revenge, I decided, was a dish best served on a foundation of my own making. And so, my life became a relentless, probably unhealthy, cycle of work. Up at 5 a.m. for a workout, in the building's sad excuse for a gym, a single treadmill, and a few mismatched dumbbells in a storage closet. At the garage by 6:30 a.m., working until 8 or 9 p.m., often later, I'd grab fast food on the way home, then study until my eyes wouldn't stay open. I enrolled in online classes for business management and automotive engineering technology. Weekends were for side hustles. I did oil changes, brake jobs, alternator swaps, anything I could manage in apartment parking lots, with a minimal set of tools. Every dollar was a brick in my new foundation. My boss, Hank, a gruff but fair man who'd owned the garage for 30 years, started to notice. At first, he just gave me more responsibility, handling parts orders, dealing with the most difficult customers. Then he had me creating the weekly schedule for the other mechanics. Within 6 months, I was practically running the day-to-day operations. One evening, as we were locking up, he looked at me, his gaze shrewd over the top of his reading glasses. I've never seen anyone work as hard as you, kid. What's driving you? Running from something or running towards something? The old me would have unloaded the whole sob story, but the new me, the one forged in the fire of betrayal, just looked him in the eye and said, "Trying to build something that can't be taken away from me, Hank." He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Good goal. Nothing like owning your own walls or your own business. That simple validation meant more to me than he could ever know. The more I learned in my classes, the more inefficiencies I saw at the garage. Hank was old school. Paper invoices, no real inventory system, pricing based on gut feeling. One night, I showed him a spreadsheet I'd built, analyzing job profitability and supply chain costs. He looked at it like I'd just performed alchemy. "Where'd you learn to do all this?" he asked. "Online classes," I said. "At night." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "You know, I've been thinking about retiring. Always figured I'd just sell the land. But would you ever be interested in buying the business?" I couldn't believe it. I'd never have that kind of money, Hank. "We could work something out," he said. "A seller finance deal. You take over more as I phase myself out. I'd rather sell it to someone who gives a damn than some corporation that'll just fire everyone." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a genuine, blazing hope ignited in my chest. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about building an empire, even if it was a small one, made of concrete floors and hydraulic lifts. That night, my goal became twofold: buy a house and buy the garage. A year into my relentless grind, things were thriving. Hank had made me the official manager, and with the new systems I implemented, a digital appointment and inventory system, targeted local marketing, we'd increased revenue by 30%. My life was Spartan, but I had a mission. Then, the whispers started. Karma, it seemed, had finally clocked in for her shift. A mutual acquaintance told me that Mark, the neighbor, had dumped Clara a few months after our divorce was finalized. His own wife found out about the affair, and he'd chosen to save his own marriage, kicking Clara to the curb. The wealthy friend Chloe was supposed to meet turned out to be a broke wannabe who was just faking it to get into clubs and had tried to get her to co-sign on a car loan. Clara had burned through her settlement money trying to keep up a lifestyle that was now gone, and Chloe, who had quit her steady office job, thinking she'd struck gold, was now struggling to find work in a tough market, her skills rusty, and her resume unimpressive. I listened, my face a mask of professional indifference, but inside, a grim satisfaction bloomed. True to his word, Hank accelerated the buyout plan. His wife's health was declining, and they wanted to move to Arizona to be in a warmer, drier climate. We structured a multi-year payment plan with the help of a lawyer Hank knew. It would be tight, but it was doable. And with my own savings, which had grown into a respectable sum from my obsessive work and Spartan living, I finally had enough for a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom house in a good neighborhood on the other side of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid brick. It had a 2-car garage. It was mine. The day I signed the preliminary paperwork, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Chloe. "Hey Ethan, it's been too long. I miss my big brother. Family should stick together." I deleted it without replying. A few days before I was scheduled to move, there was a knock on my apartment door. I opened it to find Chloe standing there. She looked nothing like the smug woman from the grocery store. Her hair was messy, her clothes were wrinkled, and her eyes had the haunted, desperate look I knew so well, the look she always had right before she asked me for something. But this time, she had my niece and nephew with her. Lily and Jake looked tired and sad. It was a low blow, using her own children as shields. "Hey, stranger," she said, attempting a casual smile. "Can I come in?" I didn't move from the doorway. "What do you want, Chloe?" Her smile faltered. "Can't a sister just visit her brother?" "A sister could have," I said, my voice flat. "But you traded that right for a few fancy dinners and a handbag." "It's been a year and a half, Chloe. A year and a half since you stood in a grocery store and told me I deserved to be cheated on." Her face crumpled. The mask was gone. "Look, I made a mistake, okay? A huge, stupid mistake. I was an idiot. Clara filled my head with all these lies and I was struggling so much. I saw a way out, and I took it." "A way out on my back," I said. "Where is Clara, by the way?" "Still your best friend?" Chloe's eyes dropped to the floor. "We're not really talking anymore. She's going through some stuff. She's broke and no longer useful to you." Then she saw the packed boxes behind me. You're moving?" "Yep," I said. "Bought a house. Closing next week." Her eyes lit up with a disturbing, predatory gleam. "A house? That's amazing. How many bedrooms?" "3, I said, knowing exactly where this was going. "Perfect," she chirped. "Because, well, I'm in a bit of a jam. My landlord is selling the building, and we have to be out by the end of the month. The kids and I have been looking, but rent is just insane right now. She took a deep breath. So I was thinking, maybe we could help each other out? The kids, and I could move in with you? Just for a little while, until I get back on my feet. I could help with bills, and the kids would love to have their uncle around. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. After the betrayal, the mockery, the complete and utter disregard for my pain, she truly believed she could just waltz back in and claim a room in the life I had built from the ashes of the one they'd helped burn down. No, I said simply. Her manufactured smile vanished. What do you mean, no? I mean no, you cannot move in with me, not for a little while, not ever. Chloe is smart. She pushed Lily forward slightly. Uncle Ethan, my 7-year-old niece said, her voice small, clearly coached, can we please live with you? Mommy's crying all the time. The audacity was breathtaking. To use her own child to manipulate me, after everything she'd done, the old me would have caved, but the old me was dead. I knelt down to my niece's level. Lily, I love you very much, I said softly, ignoring Chloe. But you can't stay with me right now. Your mum needs to sort some things out. I stood up and looked at Chloe. Her face was a mixture of hope and fear. Her strategy shifted instantly. Her eyes welled up with tears. But what about the kids? They're your niece and nephew. We have nowhere to go. We could be homeless. Is that what you want? For your own family to be on the street because you're too selfish to help? I did laugh then, a short, sharp, humorless sound that echoed in the dingy hallway. Selfish? You want to talk about selfish, Chloe? Selfish is siding with your brother's cheating wife because she takes you shopping. Selfish is mocking him when he's at rock bottom because you think you've traded up. You talk about family? Remember when Dad left and I was just a teenager and I promised Mom I'd always look after you? I kept that promise for 15 years. You broke it in 15 minutes for the chance at a rich boyfriend who turned out to be a fraud. Her face went pale. That's not. I took out my checkbook. I wrote a check for $2,000. This is for a deposit on a new apartment and first month's rent, I said, handing it to her. This is not for you. It's for them. My voice was ice. I will always make sure my niece and nephew have a roof over their heads. But you and I are done. This is the last thing you will ever get from me. The door to my home and to my life is closed to you. Don't ever use your children against me again. She stuck her foot in the frame. Please, she begged, her voice now raw with genuine panic. Ethan, please. I have no one else. Mom and Dad won't help. Clara's gone off the radar. That's not my problem, I said, repeating the exact words she had said to me. When I told her Clara had emptied our joint account, I pushed her foot out of the way and shut the door in her face. I heard her pound on it a few times, her cries of my name turning into sobs. I ignored her, turned my back, and went back to taping up a box. She was a ghost from a life I no longer lived. 2 days later, my parents showed up at my door. My mother stood with her arms crossed, my father scowling behind her. Your sister is a mess, my mother began without a preamble. She called us hysterical. You need to help her. I told her to call you, I replied. We can't take her and 2 children in, my father boomed. We're retired. You're a young man. You have a big new house. A house I built myself after the life I had was destroyed, I said, my voice dangerously calm. A life you both watched burn. You told me to compromise with a cheater. You told me relationships are complicated. You offered me nothing. Not a couch to sleep on, not a kind word. So why, exactly, do you think you have a right to stand here and tell me what to do with what I've built? My father stepped forward, his voice like ice. You've become hard, Ethan. This money, this business, It's changed you. You're not the son we raised." That blow landed, but not in the way they intended. I just nodded slowly. "You're right. I'm not the son you raised. That kid was a doormat. That kid would have let himself be guilted into taking care of the sister who betrayed him. That kid would have kept giving to people who only ever took. That kid would have set himself on fire to keep you all warm." I looked them both dead in the eye. "That kid died in a cheap studio apartment a year and a half ago, and you should probably leave my property." My mother's jaw dropped. "You will regret this." "No," I said, holding the door open. "I'm just getting started." They left, sputtering with indignation. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it, the solid wood cool against my back. The final chain had broken. The following week, after I'd moved into my new house, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I had a sinking feeling I knew who it was. I answered, putting the phone on speaker and setting it on the kitchen counter as I unpacked a box of coffee mugs. "Ethan?" The voice was hesitant, broken, and instantly recognizable. It was Clara. I heard you're doing really well," she stammered. "A house, and you're buying the garage. That's amazing." I said nothing, just continued unwrapping a mug. "Ethan, there's something else," she sobbed. "I'm pregnant, and there's a chance it's yours. From just before, you know." The world tilted. A baby. The one thing I'd always wanted. For a split second, the old Ethan, the hopeful fool, flickered to life. Could it be true? A chance to fix everything? Then the new Ethan took over, cold and calculating. The timing was too perfect. It was a lie. It had to be a lie. "Get a paternity test, Clara," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "Send me the bill. If by some miracle it's mine, my lawyer will contact yours to arrange child support. We will not be speaking again." I hung up before she could reply, and blocked the number. The climax of this whole sordid affair came 2 months later. Hank was officially retiring, and he insisted on throwing a party at the garage to celebrate and to officially announce me as the new owner. It was a big barbecue with dozens of old customers, friends, and suppliers. Leo was there, beaming, clapping me on the back. For the first time in 2 years, I felt a genuine, uncomplicated happiness. Hank was giving a speech, talking about his long career, when a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. Clara and Chloe stood there, uninvited. They looked like ghosts from a nightmare. Clara, looking thin and pale, was visibly not pregnant. Chloe looked angry and desperate. They marched right into the middle of the party. Mark was with them, lurking in the back, his face a mask of smug entitlement. He clearly thought he could still intimidate me. "Ethan," Clara shouted, her voice shrill. "You can't just ignore me. We need to talk. You owe me." Chloe chimed in, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He's throwing his family out on the street. This man is heartless. He won't even help his own sister and her children." The crowd murmured, confused looks passing between them. My moment of triumph was turning into a public circus. Mark smirked from the back, enjoying the show. Hank looked at me, a question in his eyes. I gave him a slight nod. I walked over, took the microphone from his hand, and turned to face the crowd. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. "Folks, I apologize for the interruption," I began, my voice amplified through the speakers. "Most of you have known me for years. You know I'm a private guy, but it seems some people want to make things public." I looked directly at the three of them, my accusers, my destroyers. "Let me clear a few things up," I said. "This woman," I pointed at Clara, "is my ex-wife. She cheated on me with that man." I pointed at Mark, in our home, on our anniversary. 2 months ago, she called me claiming she was pregnant with my child to try and get money from me. As you can all see, That was a lie. A wave of gasps went through the crowd. Clara's face went white. This woman, I turned to Chloe, is my sister. After I caught my wife cheating, my sister chose to side with her, providing false statements to her lawyer in exchange for gifts and money. She's correct that I won't let her move into my house, but I failed to mention the check I gave her to ensure my niece and nephew would have a roof over their heads, a check she cashed 3 days ago. Chloe looked like she'd been slapped. Finally, my eyes landed on Mark. And that man, the man who slept with my wife and tried to help her ruin me financially, has spent the last year trying to buy this property out from under Hank so he could demolish it. He wanted to bulldoze my future, just like he bulldozed my past. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. But he failed. I held up a set of keys, Hank's keys. My keys, because as of 9 a.m. this morning, the sale was finalized. The deed is in my name. This garage, this business, this land, it's all mine. I built this. I earned this. And my first act as the new owner is to enforce a zero-tolerance policy for toxic, manipulative people. I looked at 2 of my biggest, most loyal mechanics, Big Dave and Rico. They were already moving. Gentlemen, would you please show these 3 people the exit? They are no longer welcome on my property. The crowd was dead silent as Dave and Rico calmly but firmly escorted the sputtering, humiliated trio out of the garage and onto the street. As the bay door rolled down, shutting them out for good, a slow, steady applause started. It grew into a roar. Leo wrapped me in a bear hug. Hank shook my hand, his eyes shining with pride. Later that night, long after everyone had gone home, I stood alone in the center of my garage. The air smelled of gasoline, oil, and victory. I had lost a wife, a sister, and the illusion of the family I thought I had. But as I stood there, in the quiet solitude of the empire I had built, from the ashes of their betrayal, I realized I hadn't just survived. I had won. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt truly, completely, and gloriously free.